Hello there, I'm Rev Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram. If you've been seeking a compassion-based, contemplative approach to Enneagram inner work, you are certainly in the right place. This is where contemplation meets the Enneagram. So we are in week 43 of a 52-week Sunday Talk series based on the book by Oren Sofer, Your Heart Was Made for This. We are on the theme of devotion. Last week, I spoke on the topic of engaging devotion, 9 practices with heart. So if you're new here, I invite you to jump back into last week's video and check that out before you proceed with this one so you have a little bit of background. Today's talk is on devotion, 9 paths to liberate the heart. So today I'd like to take the talk in 3 parts. I would like to just briefly talk about what I mean by spiritual or sacred devotion, what some of us might term devotion to, quote, God. Then I'd like to open a little, just very brief guided meditation to support you in grounding in and opening your heart for this devotional reflection. And then in part 3, I would like to offer 9 paths to liberate the heart. This is based on the 9 Enneagram types, and more specifically, the emotional habit of each type, which is also known as the passion, sometimes called the vice of your type. So with that, let's begin. So I'd like to begin by offering what devotion, what sacred devotion, spiritual devotion, devotion to, quote, God, has come to mean to me. So 2 things that have shifted is even when I think about devotion to God, I realize that there's some idea in there of an object of devotion. And what I'd like to offer today is the consideration that we might begin with objects of our devotion, but that perhaps the ultimate goal is to have a kind of object-less devotion, devotion that is not dependent on the object, if you will, that inspires devotion, but that devotion becomes a quality of being and, in fact, a quality of heart. And so related to that, I would like to offer that, at least for me, the purpose of devotion then is not so much, again, not coming from this more fundamental religious perspective that has taught many people that, okay, that there's this divine entity out there that seeks our worship or our devotion. And so the purpose of it is like pleasing that entity out there, so somehow we will be saved. I very much do not believe that. And so when I talk about the purpose of devotion, it's very similar to when I talk about prayer in general, which is this idea that we do not pray to change God, right? We pray to change ourselves. And by change, I really mean changing or shifting our consciousness. So if you consider this idea that the purpose of devotional practice might actually be about what it does to us, what it does to me, how I'm different when I hold my life, my everyday life as sacred, when I treat washing the dishes or cleaning my room, every little act, every exchange as a devotional act, like what that shifts in me. So what's interesting is even as I bring up this idea initially as of devotion to, quote, God, whether or devotion to, for some people, Mother Mary, Allah, whatever it is, like a devotion to your teacher or your guru, that I imagine that it might bring up for some of you this sense of disillusionment, right? That we might have given our devotion over to maybe a church of origin or even to a parent or even to our partners or our families or our communities, only to be disillusioned later because the matters of the world fails us. Even God, as we conceived of God, fails us. And I want to offer that as dreadful and painful as this illusionment can be in our lives when the object of our devotion doesn't offer us what we thought it would, right? Like that we were promised from the outside, again, by people we trusted, that this disillusionment is good because it's literally taking us out of the illusion that anything outside ourselves will save us, right? That we can attach or even worship in a way, anything outside ourselves. So I think traditional notions of devotion are more like uh, notions of worship, right? And I want to say that for some of you, it was very clear that you're never going to, quote, worship a guru or worship uh, God, but we might have, from a worldly perspective, devoted ourselves to our work, right? Or devoted ourselves to a group we belong to, or devoted ourselves to a project, and then been disillusioned by the results of that dedication or commitment of our work. And so I'm really inviting you to consider all the ways we devote ourselves to something that where we invest in this notion of being devoted to something seemingly outside of ourselves, and where we focus on having some sort of outcome as a result of that objectified devotion. And then I invite you to consider that a lot of times this disillusionment is actually an opening for us to rededicate or redevote ourselves. I have repeatedly come to this awareness that nothing, however good, however amazing my life can be sometimes, that nothing in this world will ever bring me like a lasting fulfillment and peace. That this peace has to come through my own consciousness. And it is coming increasingly as I let go of this belief that this relationship or this job will ever really bring me the peace of, quote, God. When we begin to recognize this, then devotion can begin to take a different form in our lives, where as I practice devotion to, again, washing the dishes, brushing my teeth, to everything I do, to making this teaching, right, this offering, that what it does is it brings my heart online, right? That when I devotedly do something, it shifts how I show up. And a lot of times there's a word, right? When we don't show up with all of our mental faculties, we can often be called absent-minded. But I don't know that we have something similar yet for when we're like absent-hearted, right? So this idea that like, oh, I'm bringing my heart online. And as I bring my heart online, the moment is fuller because I'm more fully here. My heart is here and not just my mind and not just my body. And then I want to take it to another level to say that our hearts can also lead us astray. And what the Enneagram has helped me to do is to see the 9 different ways when we purport to bring our hearts online, our hearts aren't fully open. They're actually cycling through a habit of heart. That habit is called our passion or our vice. Sofer writes, without devotion, we suffer from spiritual hunger. We sense something is missing, perhaps without even knowing what it is. Without the opportunity to give ourselves to something worthwhile, our need for devotion may become displaced onto addictions to accumulation, substances or appearances, onto entertainments and pleasures, or onto feelings of self-judgment, inadequacy, and self-loathing. In effect, we become what Buddhists call hungry ghosts, endlessly consuming, never fulfilled. And so I invite you to consider again that we don't practice devotion in order to gain some sort of salvation or whatnot from the object of our devotion. Although many of us, if you're anything like me, you've tried to do that in romantic relationships. Uh, but instead, here's another Sofer quote: "We don't practice devotion," he writes, "to get something in return. We practice it for its own sake, as a complete offering of our heart." He writes again, "Singing my son to sleep in my arms, lowering him gently into a warm bath, even wiping his bottom, done wholeheartedly. These acts express full devotion." Too often, when we look at spiritual practice, the ego lays hold of it and says, "Am I doing this right? Is this enough?" There's an implied sense of, have I earned my way into some kingdom, right? Into worthiness? And there's something about devotion as an act of wholehearted love or surrender that for me speaks to the truth of at least my understanding of the spiritual journey, that we begin to transcend our individual egos, that through this cultivation of a sense of devotion, we enter into the realm of the infinite. And so we are more connected, not only in space, spatially more one with each other, but connected in time in a way where there's a sense of timelessness in my act of utter devotion. And somehow, not entranced by my need for my own well-being, I am more likely to make choices that will be for the good of even generations that continue after me. You know, this idea that devotion to spirituality is, in a way, devotion to liberation from my own little orbit on the Enneagram. And so devotion to liberation is more than even about my personal freedom, because spiritual devotion, once cultivated within me, starts to transcend the personal identity, right? And it starts to bring me out beyond, transcend, but also include. It's not like it's the old notion of, oh, I sacrifice myself and I don't get to partake in it. It's more that my sense of self becomes enlarged because the sense of holding tightly to my ego is softly opened. So with that, I would love to take us into a very brief meditation. So I invite you to get situated, and if you're driving, definitely don't do this with your eyes closed. You can just listen for now and come back later. But if you are just sitting here at home in your living room, sitting in your office, I invite you to get into a comfy position, and you can pause the video to find a good spot. And then I invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. And just take a few moments, because that was a lot of teaching. Your energy might be up in your head. And I invite you to just gently feel this energetic drop when you bring your attention from your head into your heart space. Yeah. You might take a few audible breaths, drawing out that exhale. And here we want to bring attention to the heart space. So now you might envision your breath moving in and out right through your chest area, that whole chest area, what I might call your heart center. And see if you can draw your breath out to the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. On the inhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on the exhale. As you keep your attention on your heart space, your eyes closed, I invite you to consider that first notion of the hungry ghost, the way your heart, the attention of the heart is pulled, valuing it over your valuing of your spiritual practice, making time for it, making space for it. What else is always more important? Where your heart feels that tug, but maybe feels it even compulsively. So I'm just going to go through all 9 numbers on the Enneagram to offer some suggestions where the ego might be addicted, where the personality might be addicted. In the absence of the divine, the type gets us addicted at point 1 to resentment. So the heart is not really open, but it cycles around even reasons to be resentful. And then your behavior starts circling around that. And so you overwork and you take on more than your share of responsibility. And those behaviors just support more of your heart feeling resentment. See if you can feel gently and compassionately into that. And then at point 2, you get pulled into the heart space of pride that rejects your humanity and says you don't need anything, but they do. And so you see these attitudes of self-abnegation. And in your pride, you still have needs. So you might tend towards some manipulative behavior of giving to get. See if you can feel that in your heart space and what that feels like. So you recognize it, not to judge yourself, but to be aware. And then for the 3, feeling into this personality habit of deceit, and especially self-deceit, shutting down what you actually want, what you actually feel in order to get the job done, to achieve, to perform as you deemed is the excellent way to be, other than how you are really feeling. See if you can sense into that in your heart space. And then for the 4, see if you can feel into that sadness that comes from the envy of your type, where it's comparing yourself with others, comparing your current situation with some sort of fantasized notion about your past, a past relationship, a past situation that isn't here anymore, never allowing yourself to feel like what's here is enough. Feel how the hungry ghost of your personality type tends toward that longing. And then for the 5, feel into that avarice, that sense of not enoughness that makes you want to keep what little you think you have, what little privacy, what little energy, what little in terms of resources. So your heart stays guarded, as if somehow sharing it would actually give it away and that you would lose it. So feel into that sense of hoarding or withholding, and especially of your own heart, how it gets compartmentalized, shut in the back and not shared with those in your vicinity. And then for the 6, feel how your personality type expresses through your heart as an addiction to the feeling of fear. And so the behaviors that can cycle around that is just the ones of making things safe, whether it's through building alliances or otherwise, emotional or physical safety. Just notice how when you're trapped in that habit, there really isn't room in your heart for anything else. And then for the 7, gluttony, which is the sense of a little bit of everything, take a little bit of everything. And the sense of wanting the new and the next. And it's not always things. More often, it's actually just experiences, making sure that you have in line, in your mind even. You might not even have to go do it, just in your head, always thinking about that. And so the heart drives that. How does the heart's hunger drive that? Drive you to think quickly and plan more and next, rather than now and enough. And then for the 8, notice how the heart is lusty. It's not just sexual lust. It's that emotional lust for more, more, more. More is better, right? And see how that can actually sabotage happiness for you. And there's a grabbing sense to that heart, that lust. Everything keeps having to be bigger. And see if you can feel that, again, without judgment. And then for the 9, feel the sloth of the heart that doesn't want to even know itself, the tendency to check out. It's not just mentally. It's like the heart not caring enough to try, not caring enough to know what you really want. Feel into that, the pain of that numbing out, the hungry ghosts. And at each point on the Enneagram, feel how that heart pattern, that emotional pattern, it just circles and circles, and there's no satisfying it. That's what it means to be a hungry ghost, the spiritual hunger that never gets filled. But this is a loop based on your personality pattern. But notice how there are moments when the pattern gets broken. There are moments of devoted attention of the heart to something else. That there's a different quality of the heart that's available. And so in these 9 paths to liberate the heart, whatever your type, I invite you to just journey through all of them. At point 1, notice when your heart feels light. Chances are there are moments already, but you don't pay that much devoted attention. So this week, notice when your heart feels light and cultivate those moments through your devoted attention. And then at point 2, notice when your needs are being met, especially by something or someone outside of you. Notice that and bring some devoted heart attention to those moments. So you're creating a different pattern of heart that breaks the pattern of your passion on the Enneagram, which is pride. And so for the 3, notice when things are unfolding in your day without you performing or achieving, and bring devoted attention to those moments. For the 4, notice when things are beautiful in the here and now, and bring devoted attention to these moments. For the 5, notice when you feel abundant or the sense that you have enough, and bring devoted attention, heart attention to these moments. And for the 6, notice your feet on the ground, and other times when you feel physically or emotionally grounded, rooted, supported. Bring devoted attention to those moments. For the 7, notice when things are unfolding in your day without your personal efforts. Bring devoted attention to the moments. that simply unfold without you having to cast your attention forward. For the 8 notice moments when you feel in touch with your innocence. And then not only yours, but others. But not just others, also yours. And bring devoted attention to your own heart in those moments. And then finally, for the 9, notice when you realize your own feelings. Whoa, I feel X, Y, and Z. Wow. Celebrate by bringing devoted attention to those moments. In closing, I want to share these words from Gurdjieff. You are in prison. If you wish to get out of prison, the first thing you must do is realize that you are in prison. If you think you are free, you can't escape. Each Enneagram type has an emotional prison that keeps our hearts locked up, not able to be awakened because we are addicted to the emotional habit of our type. And it feels so much like us that doing anything else seems inauthentic or just so contrary or so wrong. And so the practice of devotion, whether it begins with simply being devoted to what's actually happening in the present moment as you are doing your chores, it starts to put a spoke into the wheel of that cycle of your emotional habit. And then today I offered 9 other spokes that could be specific to the wheel of your type. I hope this has been of service to you. Blessings, and I'll see you next week.